Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Boston, I never imagined that our family's legacy would become the very thing that tore us apart. The stately Victorian mansion on Beacon Street, with its wraparound porch and carefully manicured gardens, held memories of countless Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations. My grandmother, Eleanor Bradford, had built an empire from a small textile business, turning it into a manufacturing powerhouse that employed half the town. The million-dollar inheritance she left behind was more than just money. It was the culmination of 3 generations of hard work, innovation, and sacrifice. I remember sitting on the window seat in the library, watching my brother Thomas playing baseball in the backyard with our cousins. Back then, we were inseparable. He'd always save me a spot at the dinner table, defend me from schoolyard bullies, and share his chocolate chip cookies from Murphy's Bakery down the street. Our parents, James and Margaret, raised us to believe that family meant everything. Blood runs thicker than water, Dad would say during our weekly family meetings, his voice warm with conviction. The first cracks appeared during my sophomore year at Harvard. I'd chosen to study business administration, following in Grandma Eleanor's footsteps. Thomas, 3 years my senior, was already working at the family company, learning the ropes from Dad. The whispers started small, concerns about a woman taking over, doubts about my capability to handle the pressure, suggestions that tradition dictated male leadership. Aunt Sarah, Mom's younger sister, would pat my hand during family gatherings and say, "Darling, wouldn't you rather focus on starting a family? The business world can be so demanding." I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove my worth. My roommate, Jenny Chin, became my closest confidant, staying up late with me as I pored over financial reports and business strategies. "You're twice as smart as any of them," she'd say, pushing another cup of coffee across our tiny dorm room desk. "They're just scared because they know it." The summer internships at competing firms raised eyebrows at family dinners. Uncle Robert, always quick with an opinion after his 3rd glass of wine, would reminisce about how things were in his day. The tension would settle over the dining room like a heavy fog, broken only by the clinking of silverware and forced conversations about the weather. Mom would squeeze my hand under the table, her silent support a lifeline in those uncomfortable moments. During my senior year, I landed a prestigious consulting position at McKinsey. The day I shared the news, Thomas's face darkened. We were standing in the kitchen of our family home, the autumn light streaming through the windows, the smell of Mom's apple pie filling the air. "You're abandoning the family business," he said, his voice tight with disappointment. "Everything Grandma built, everything Dad's worked for, you're just walking away from it all." I tried to explain that I wanted to gain outside experience, to bring fresh perspectives back to our company. But the wall between us had already started to rise, brick by brick, built from misunderstanding and wounded pride. The weekly phone calls became monthly, then quarterly. Our easy laughter turned to stilted small talk. The inheritance became a shadow looming over every family gathering. Thanksgiving that year was particularly tense. Cousin Michael, always the peacemaker, tried to steer conversations toward neutral territory, but the undercurrent of resentment was impossible to ignore. I caught glimpses of hushed conversations in corners, saw the way certain relatives would fall silent when I entered a room. I found solace in my work, building a reputation for innovation and strategic thinking. My boss, Linda Martinez, became a mentor, showing me how to navigate the male-dominated corporate world with grace and determination. "Your family's resistance," she told me over lunch one day at the corner cafe, "comes from fear of change. Change threatens the comfortable patterns they've built their lives around." The final threads of our once-tight family fabric began to unravel during Grandma Eleanor's anniversary dinner. The event was held at the Somerset Club, where she'd been one of the first female members. Thomas had been drinking heavily, his words becoming sharper as the evening wore on. When I mentioned my recent promotion, he scoffed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Must be nice," he said, swirling his scotch, "having everything handed to you because you're Dad's precious little girl." The hurt ran deep, but it wasn't just about Thomas anymore. I saw the same prejudice reflected in the eyes of other family members, the aunts who'd stopped inviting me to their book club, the cousins who'd excluded me from their business ventures. The inheritance, meant to be a blessing, had become a curse, exposing the fault lines in our family's foundation. I spent Christmas that year in my apartment in Cambridge, surrounded by case files and takeout containers from the local Chinese restaurant. Jenny, now working at a tech startup in Seattle, called to check on me. "Families are complicated," she said, her voice crackling over the phone. "But you can't let their limitations become your own." The weight of the legacy pressed heavier with each passing day. I'd catch myself staring at old family photos, trying to pinpoint the moment when everything changed. Was it during the board meeting where I'd challenged Uncle Robert's outdated marketing strategy? Or perhaps at the family reunion where I'd defended my decision to modernize our production methods? The inheritance wasn't just about money. It represented everything I'd been fighting for: respect, recognition, the right to chart my own course while honoring our family's legacy. But as winter deepened and the new year approached, I realized that the price of that legacy might be higher than I'd ever imagined. The warm, unbreakable bond I'd shared with my brother had frozen over, crystallized into something sharp and dangerous, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter completely. The confrontation happened on a chilly March evening at Morton's Steakhouse in downtown Boston, where our family had gathered to celebrate Dad's 60th birthday. The private dining room buzzed with conversation and the clink of wine glasses, while outside, rain tapped steadily against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd spent the afternoon at a board meeting, rushing through traffic to make it on time, determined not to give Thomas another reason to criticize me. Mom had organized everything perfectly, from the carefully arranged place cards to Dad's favorite chocolate souffle for dessert. I sat between Cousin Emma and Uncle Robert, trying to focus on Emma's stories about her new pediatric practice while ignoring the pointed looks Thomas kept shooting my way from across the table. He'd been drinking since before I arrived, his cheeks flushed red above his barely touched filet mignon. The tension had been building all week. Our quarterly company financial review was coming up, and I discovered some concerning irregularities in the accounts Thomas managed. When I tried to discuss it with him privately at his office yesterday, he'd brush me off, claiming he was too busy to deal with my micromanaging. The memory of his dismissive wave still stung. "Sarah, pass the potatoes, would you?" Mom's voice cut through my thoughts. I reached for the silver serving dish, but Thomas interrupted. "Oh, let me help her," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Wouldn't want her to strain herself with such a heavy responsibility." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled around the table. Dad shot him a warning look, but Thomas was too far gone to notice or care. I took a deep breath, remembering Linda's advice about choosing my battles. "I can manage, thanks," I replied evenly, passing the potatoes to Uncle Robert. The conversation resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted, like the air before a storm. Aunt Patricia, always oblivious to tension, launched into a story about her recent cruise to the Bahamas. I picked at my green beans, trying to stay calm, but I could feel Thomas's eyes on me, waiting for an opening. When the waiter came to clear the main course plates, Thomas pushed his chair back suddenly. "You know what?" he announced, loud enough to silence all other conversations. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." He stood unsteadily, gripping the back of his chair. "We're all sitting here, pretending everything's fine, while the company, our family's legacy, is being torn apart." "Thomas, please," Mom whispered, her face pale. "This isn't the time or place." But he wasn't finished. "Do you want to know what I found today?" He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. "Little sister here has been meeting with modernization consultants behind our backs. Planning to streamline operations. That's corporate speak for firing half our loyal workers, isn't it, Sarah?" The room fell silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. "That's not true," I said quietly. "The consultants are helping us become more efficient, but no one's losing their jobs. If you'd attended any of the planning meetings, he laughed bitterly. "You mean your little power trips? Where you sit there with your Harvard degree and your fancy spreadsheets, pretending you know better than people who've worked in this industry for decades. Dad stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. That's enough, Thomas. We're here to celebrate. No, let her defend herself. Thomas's voice rose. Let her explain why she thinks she deserves to run this company. I am a man. You deserve nothing because you are a woman, you weakling. The words exploded from him, sharp and venomous, echoing off the wood-paneled walls. The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. Emma reached for my hand under the table, but I pulled away, standing slowly to face my brother. Is that what this is really about? My voice was steady, though my hands shook. Not the consultants, not the modernization, just the fact that I'm a woman. Don't twist my words, he spat. You're not qualified. You've never worked a day on the factory floor. I worked every summer in high school and college, Thomas. In every department. While you were off at lacrosse camp and sailing with your friends, I was learning the business from the ground up. But you never noticed, did you? You were too busy assuming I'd just step aside and let you take control. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows. Lightning flashed, illuminating the shocked faces around the table. Uncle Robert was staring into his wine glass. Aunt Patricia had tears running down her cheeks. You're destroying everything, Thomas continued, his voice cracking. Everything our family built. And everyone's too afraid to stop you because you're daddy's little princess. I felt something snap inside me, not anger, but a sudden, crystal-clear understanding. You're scared, I said softly. You're terrified that I might actually be good at this. That I might make changes that work. That I might succeed where you've been too afraid to even try. He lunged forward, sending his water glass crashing to the floor. Dad and Uncle Robert jumped up to restrain him, but he shrugged them off. You think you're so smart? He shouted. You think your fancy degree and your progressive ideas make you better than me? I've given my life to this company. And I haven't? I shot back, my composure finally breaking. Every decision I've made, every late night, every missed holiday, it's all been for the company. For our family. But you can't see past your own prejudice to recognize that. Mom was crying now, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streaks down her face. Emma had moved to comfort her, while Aunt Patricia called frantically for the waiter. The perfect birthday celebration had devolved into chaos, and it was all caught in the reflection of the rain-streaked windows. Our family's private tragedy played out against the backdrop of Boston's glittering nightscape. I think, Dad said, his voice tight with controlled anger, that this dinner is over. He pulled out his wallet, dropping several $100 bills on the table. Thomas, you're taking a cab home. Sarah, Emma will drive you. As we gathered our things in stunned silence, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the window, Thomas and me, standing on opposite sides of the room, mirror images of hurt and betrayal. In that moment, I saw us as children again, sharing secrets and dreams, protecting each other from the world. But that version of us was gone, shattered by words that could never be unsaid. The ride home with Emma was silent, broken only by the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. She tried to make conversation once or twice, but eventually gave up. What could anyone say after witnessing such a raw display of family dysfunction? That night, I lay awake in my apartment, replaying Thomas's words over and over. The hurt was there, sharp and immediate, but something else was growing alongside it, a determination that felt like steel in my spine. His words had meant to diminish me, to put me in my place, but they had instead revealed the true nature of what I was fighting against. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore, or even about the company. It was about breaking free from the chains of prejudice that had bound women in our family for generations. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I made a decision. I would not let Thomas's hatred define me. I would not shrink to make him feel bigger. The company needed to change, and if that meant standing alone against generations of patriarchal tradition, then so be it. I was my grandmother's granddaughter, after all, and Eleanor Bradford had never backed down from a fight. The week after the disastrous dinner at Morton's, I took a personal leave from work. I needed space to think, to process, to plan my next move. My apartment in Cambridge felt too close to everything, so I drove up to our family summer cottage in Maine, a small haven on the coast near Bar Harbor. The 3-hour drive along I-95 gave me time to clear my head, the steady rhythm of the highway helping to calm my racing thoughts. The cottage was exactly as I remembered it from childhood summers. The blue shutters needed a fresh coat of paint, and the screen door still creaked, but it felt like a sanctuary. I spent the first day just sitting on the worn deck chairs, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore, letting the salt air wash away the lingering tension from the city. Jenny called that evening, and I finally let myself break down as I told her everything. "I just keep hearing his words," I said, curled up on the old plaid couch. The way he looked at me, like I was nothing. Less than nothing. "Listen to me." Jenny's voice was firm through the phone. "You're Sarah Bradford. You graduated top of our class at Harvard. You've already transformed 3 departments at the company. Your brother's words don't define you. Your actions do." She was right, of course. I spent the next morning going through old photo albums I found in the cottage's cedar chest. There was Grandma Eleanor in her first shop, sleeves rolled up, determination written across her face. Another showed her shaking hands with the mayor at the opening of our second factory. She'd faced her own battles, broken her own barriers. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was her legacy of courage. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. I found articles about women CEOs breaking barriers in male-dominated industries. I read about Mary Barra at GM, Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo, and countless others who'd faced similar challenges. Their stories resonated with something deep inside me, awakening a fierce determination I hadn't known I possessed. Linda, my mentor, sent me a care package that arrived on my 3rd day at the cottage. Inside was a copy of Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, a box of my favorite Earl Grey tea, and a handwritten note. "Take the time you need, but remember, you were built for this fight." I spent that afternoon on the beach, the book in my lap, making notes in the margins and drawing connections to my own situation. The local coffee shop, Harbor Coffee, became my morning routine. The owner, Marie, was a woman in her 60s who'd built the place from nothing after her husband passed away. "Men will always try to tell you what you can't do," she told me one morning, sliding an extra blueberry muffin onto my plate. "The trick is to smile, nod, and then go right ahead and prove them wrong." I started running along the beach every morning, pushing myself harder each day. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, and I found myself working through problems as I ran. I thought about the company's outdated infrastructure, the resistance to digital transformation, the inefficiencies in our supply chain. Each issue became a puzzle to solve rather than an insurmountable obstacle. Emma drove up to visit for a weekend, bringing news from home. "Dad's furious with Thomas," she reported as we walked along the shore. "He's suspended him from board meetings until further notice." And Aunt Patricia actually spoke up at Sunday dinner, said it was about time the company had some fresh perspectives. The support meant more than I could express, but I knew this wasn't just about having others fight my battles. I needed to find my own voice, my own strength. I started writing in a journal, mapping out my vision for the company's future. Innovation didn't have to mean destroying our heritage, it could mean building on it, making it stronger. One stormy night, unable to sleep, I found Grandma Eleanor's old diary in a dusty box in the attic. Her words from 1962 jumped off the page. "They say a woman can't run a factory. They say it's not ladylike to negotiate contracts. Well, I say watch me." I stayed up until dawn, reading about her struggles, her victories, her unwavering belief in herself. I called Mom the next day. We hadn't really talked since the dinner, and her voice was hesitant when she answered. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she began, but I cut her off. "Mom, I need you to listen. I'm not apologizing for who I am or what I want to achieve. I love this family, and I love our company, but things need to change. And I'm going to be the one to change them." There was a long pause before she replied, "You sound just like your grandmother." For the first time in weeks, I heard pride in her voice. As my second week at the cottage drew to a close, I felt the fog of hurt and confusion lifting. In its place was a crystal-clear sense of purpose. I spent my last day organizing my notes, creating action plans, and preparing for what I knew would be a challenging return to Boston. The inheritance that had seemed like a burden now felt like a responsibility, not just to my family's legacy, but to every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. I thought about all the female employees at our company, watching this drama unfold, wondering if anything would ever change. I owed it to them, to Grandma Eleanor, to myself, to stand firm. On my last evening, I walked down to the beach at sunset. The tide was coming in, each wave washing away the day's footprints in the sand. Tomorrow, I would drive back to Boston. Tomorrow, I would walk into the office with my head held high. Tomorrow, I would begin the work of transforming not just our company, but the very mindset that had held us back for so long. I took one last deep breath of salt air, feeling the strength of generations of strong women flowing through me. Thomas's words no longer had the power to cut. They had instead become the catalyst for something much bigger than our sibling rivalry. This wasn't just about proving him wrong. It was about proving that capability knows no gender, that tradition can evolve without being destroyed, that the future belongs to those brave enough to shape it. As I packed my car the next morning, Marie from the coffee shop handed me a travel mug of coffee and another blueberry muffin. "Give hell, honey," she said with a wink. I smiled, knowing that's exactly what I intended to do, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet, unstoppable force of absolute conviction in who I was and what I could achieve. I returned to Boston on a crisp Monday morning, driving straight to the company headquarters in Charlestown. The familiar red brick building looked different somehow, not intimidating, but full of possibility. I'd arranged a meeting with Thomas for 9 o'clock, asking Linda to be present as a neutral third party. My brother's secretary, Nancy, gave me a small smile as I walked past her desk. Word of the Mortons incident had clearly made the rounds. Thomas was already in the conference room, slouched in a chair, looking tired and slightly hungover. The past 2 weeks hadn't been kind to him. His usual pristine appearance was rumpled, his tie slightly askew. Linda sat in the corner, her tablet ready to take notes. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. "Thanks for coming," I said, closing the door behind me. My voice was steady, controlled. The time at the cottage had given me more than just resolve, it had given me clarity. "We need to talk about what happened at Dad's birthday dinner." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I had too much to drink." I said some things. No, I cut him off, taking a seat across from him. "This isn't about you having too much to drink. This is about years of prejudice, years of dismissing my capabilities, years of trying to undermine me because I'm a woman." The air conditioning hummed softly in the background as I pulled out Grandma Eleanor's diary and placed it on the table. "Do you know what Grandma wrote in 1962 when the bank refused to give her a loan because she was a woman? She wrote, 'They think being female makes me weak. They'll learn that being underestimated is my greatest strength.'" Thomas's eyes flickered to the diary, then away. I could see him remembering summers spent at Grandma's house, listening to her stories about building the business. She'd never played favorites between us. She'd seen potential in both her grandchildren. "I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking about our family, our company, and our future," I continued. "I've looked at the numbers, Thomas. The departments you manage are down 15% in efficiency. The modernization plans you opposed? They could save us millions and create better working conditions for our employees." Linda quietly slid a report across the table, the latest quarterly numbers. Thomas stared at them, his face reddening. "These aren't, they're accurate," Linda interjected softly. "I verified them myself." I leaned forward. "This isn't about you versus me anymore. This is about the 150 families that depend on this company for their livelihood. This is about Grandma's legacy. This is about doing what's right." The silence stretched between us. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache for simpler times. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked, his voice rough. "I want you to acknowledge your prejudice. I want you to understand the damage you've done, not just to me, but to every woman in this company who's heard about your outburst. I want you to make this right." I pulled out another document, a proposal for a company-wide diversity and inclusion initiative. This includes mandatory training for all management positions, mentorship programs for female employees, and clear paths for advancement based on merit, not gender. Thomas picked up the proposal, flipping through it slowly. I could see the moment he reached the section about his role, he would step down as department head but remain on the board, contingent on completing the training program and making a public apology. "You want me to humiliate myself," he said, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "No," I replied. "I want you to grow. I want you to be the brother I used to look up to. The one who protected me, who believed in me. Remember him?" Something shifted in his expression. He looked at the family photo on the conference room wall, Grandma Eleanor standing proudly in front of the factory, both of us as children beside her. "I remember when you fell off your bike," he said quietly. "You were maybe 7. You scraped your knee badly, but you wouldn't cry. You just got back on and kept riding. I learned that from you," I said softly. "You taught me to be strong, Thomas." "When did you start seeing that strength as a threat?" He put down the proposal and, for the first time in years, really looked at me. "I've been an ass, haven't I?" "Yes," I agreed. "A monumental one." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Grandma would have kicked my butt for what I said at Morton's. She still might, if there's any justice in the afterlife." Linda cleared her throat gently. "Should I schedule the all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning?" Thomas straightened in his chair. "No," he said. "Let's do it now. The whole company needs to hear this, and they need to hear it today." An hour later, standing in the factory's main assembly area, surrounded by every employee who could fit in the space, I watched my brother step up to the microphone. He looked nervous. Thomas Bradford, who could charm potential clients without breaking a sweat, was actually nervous. "Many of you have heard about what happened at our father's birthday dinner," he began. "What you heard was true. I said things that were not just unprofessional, but deeply wrong. I let my prejudice and my pride cloud my judgment. I forgot the values this company was built on: innovation, respect, and the belief that talent knows no gender." The workers were dead silent, hanging on every word. I saw Nancy dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "My sister, Sarah Bradford, is the most qualified person to lead this company into the future. Not despite being a woman, but because she has the vision, the skills, and the courage to make the hard decisions I've been too afraid to make. I'm stepping down as department head, effective immediately, and I ask for your support as we enter a new chapter in our company's history." He turned to face me directly. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. Can you forgive me?" The moment hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I thought about the little girl who once idolized her big brother, about the woman who'd fought so hard to prove herself, about the future we could build together if we both let go of the past. I stepped forward and hugged him, right there in front of everyone. The assembly area erupted in applause. Over Thomas's shoulder, I caught sight of Dad standing in the doorway, Mom beside him. They were both smiling through tears. Later that evening, as I sat in my office watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in shades of gold, I opened Grandma Eleanor's diary again. "Success isn't about proving others wrong," she'd written. "It's about proving yourself right." I smiled, knowing that today we'd done both. Thomas knocked on my door, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Got a minute? I'd like to hear more about those modernization plans." "Pull up a chair," I said. "We've got a lot of work to do." The inheritance that had nearly torn us apart had ultimately brought us back together, stronger than before. As we spread the plans across my desk, I realized that sometimes making someone repent isn't about punishment, it's about giving them the chance to become better than they were. The months following Thomas's public apology brought more changes than I could have imagined. Our story somehow leaked to the Boston Globe. I suspect Nancy had something to do with it, and suddenly, Bradford Manufacturing became a case study in corporate transformation. The article's headline read, "Family Business Breaks Gender Barrier, a Modern Tale of Change." The publicity wasn't something I'd planned for, but I decided to embrace it. Linda helped me prepare for interviews, coaching me on how to turn our family struggle into a message of hope for other women in business. "Your story matters," she insisted during one of our prep sessions at Thinking Cup on Tremont Street. "It's not just about you and Thomas anymore. It's about every woman who's been told she doesn't belong in the boardroom." The most unexpected call came from Emily Chin, president of the Massachusetts Women's Business Association. She invited me to speak at their annual conference at the Heinz Convention Center. "We need voices like yours," she said. "Stories that show change is possible, even in the most traditional industries." I spent weeks preparing for that speech, working with Thomas to understand exactly how our family's prejudices had evolved. He was surprisingly insightful once he started examining his own beliefs. It wasn't just about gender, he admitted during one of our late-night strategy sessions. It was about control, about feeling threatened by any kind of change. We'd been doing things the same way for so long, we forgot why we were doing them in the first place. The day of the conference, I stood before a room of 300 women entrepreneurs, my hands slightly shaky as I adjusted the microphone. "My grandmother started this company with a single sewing machine and an idea," I began. "She faced discrimination, ridicule, and countless closed doors. But she persisted because she believed that capability isn't determined by gender, it's determined by passion, dedication, and vision." The response was overwhelming. Women lined up afterward to share their own stories of workplace discrimination, of family businesses where they were passed over for male relatives, of the subtle and not-so-subtle ways they'd been made to feel less than. Each story strengthened my resolve to do more. Back at the office, I worked with HR to implement comprehensive changes. We established a mentorship program pairing experienced female managers with promising young employees. The diversity training we'd started with Thomas became mandatory for all levels of management. We revised our hiring practices, promotion criteria, and pay scales to eliminate gender bias. Nancy, Thomas's former secretary, became our first success story. She'd been quietly taking night classes in supply chain management at Boston University. When a position opened up in our logistics department, she applied. Thomas himself recommended her for the role. "She's been practically running my department anyway," he admitted. It's time she got the title and salary to match. The changes weren't always smooth. Uncle Robert resigned from the board in protest, taking a few old guard supporters with him. But for every person who resisted, there were others who stepped up to embrace the new direction. Cousin Emma joined the board, bringing her experience in healthcare administration. Aunt Patricia, to everyone's surprise, became one of our strongest advocates for change. We started hosting monthly lunch and learn sessions where employees could share their experiences and suggestions. Maria from accounting talked about being the only woman in her department for 15 years. John from IT discussed the importance of male allies in creating inclusive workplaces. These conversations, sometimes uncomfortable but always honest, became the foundation for real cultural change. The ripple effects spread beyond our company. Other family businesses in the area started reaching out, asking for advice on their own transformation processes. I connected them with resources, shared our experiences, and sometimes just listened as they worked through their challenges. Every success story felt like another link breaking in the chain of systemic misogyny. One particularly meaningful moment came when the daughter of one of our longest-serving factory workers got accepted to business school. Her father, Mike, had been with the company for 30 years and had initially been skeptical of the changes. He caught me in the hallway one morning, tears in his eyes. "My Jenny never thought she could go into business," he said. "Seeing you run this company changed her mind about what's possible." Thomas and I started a scholarship program for young women pursuing business degrees, naming it after Grandma Eleanor. The first recipient was a bright young woman from Dorchester who reminded me so much of myself at that age, full of ambition, but facing an uphill battle against ingrained prejudices. The transformation wasn't just about policies and programs, it was about changing hearts and minds. I saw it in small moments. Male executives automatically including female colleagues in important discussions, managers actively seeking diverse perspectives, younger employees feeling confident enough to speak up in meetings. One year after Thomas's public apology, we hosted a company-wide celebration at the Boston Harbor Hotel. The theme was breaking barriers, building bridges. Looking around the room, I saw the future we'd been working toward. Men and women working together as equals, judged by their contributions rather than their gender. During the celebration, Linda pulled me aside to show me something on her phone. Our company had just been named one of Boston's best places to work for women. "You did this," she said, squeezing my arm. "You turned a family crisis into a movement." But I knew it wasn't just me. It was every person who'd chosen to examine their beliefs and make changes. It was Thomas, showing that people can grow beyond their prejudices. It was our employees, embracing a new way of thinking. It was Grandma Eleanor's spirit, living on in every woman who refused to be limited by someone else's expectations. That night, as I stood on the hotel's rooftop terrace watching the lights of Boston Harbor twinkle in the darkness, I thought about how far we'd come. The inheritance that had once threatened to tear our family apart had become a tool for positive change. We weren't just breaking chains, we were building something new in their place, a future where gender wouldn't determine destiny, where capability would always matter more than category. Mom joined me on the terrace, wrapping her arm around my shoulders like she used to when I was little. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said softly. "Not just of what you've achieved, but of how you achieved it, with determination, grace, and the courage to fight for what's right." I smiled, thinking of all the women who would come after me, finding doors open that had once been firmly closed. "We're not done yet," I said. "This is just the beginning." 5 years have passed since that fateful dinner at Morton's, and sometimes I still catch myself marveling at how much has changed. I'm sitting in my office at Bradford Manufacturing's new headquarters in the Seaport District, watching cargo ships drift across Boston Harbor. The move from our old Charlestown building was symbolic of our larger transformation, a step into the future while honoring our past. The million-dollar inheritance that once seemed like a burden has multiplied many times over. Under our modernized leadership approach, the company's value has tripled. But the real wealth isn't in our bank accounts, it's in the lives we've touched and the barriers we've broken. This morning, I had breakfast with Thomas at our old favorite spot, Mike's City Diner in the South End. We try to meet at least once a month, just the two of us, to talk about everything and nothing. He's different now, softer around the edges, but stronger at his core. His teenage daughter, Katie, has started showing interest in the business, and watching him encourage her dreams has been one of my greatest joys. "Remember when I thought women couldn't run a company?" He laughed, shaking his head over his coffee. "Now Katie's talking about getting her MBA, and I'm her biggest cheerleader." Life's funny sometimes. The company has become a model for gender equality in the manufacturing sector. Last week, a delegation from Japan visited to study our practices. I watched with pride as Nancy, now our head of operations, led them through the factory floor. She's implemented efficiency improvements that have not only increased productivity, but also made the work environment more inclusive for everyone. We've expanded the Eleanor Bradford Scholarship to support 20 young women each year, focusing on candidates from underprivileged backgrounds. Many of them intern with us during their summers, bringing fresh perspectives and energy to our teams. One of our first scholarship recipients, Maria Santos from East Boston, is now leading our digital transformation initiative. The old guard who initially resisted change have mostly come around. Uncle Robert returned to the board last year, admitting that he'd been wrong. "You've built something remarkable here," he told me at the Christmas party. "Something bigger than all of us." Even Aunt Patricia has become an unexpected ally, starting a mentorship network for women in manufacturing that's spread across New England. Our family dynamics have healed in ways I never thought possible. Sunday dinners at Mom and Dad's house in Beacon Hill are lively affairs again, filled with debate and laughter rather than tension. Last week, we all gathered to celebrate Dad's 65th birthday at Morton's of all places. This time, the only tears were happy ones. The transformation hasn't been limited to our company. We've partnered with local schools to create STEM programs for girls, sponsored women's leadership conferences, and worked with other family-owned businesses to implement similar changes. The ripple effects have touched countless lives across Massachusetts and beyond. Jenny, my old college roommate, flew in from Seattle last month to speak at our annual Women in Leadership Summit. "You didn't just break the glass ceiling," she told the audience. "You showed others how to build elevators through it." The metaphor might have been a bit cheesy, but it captured something essential about our journey. Linda retired last year, but not before helping us establish the Martinez Leadership Institute, a training program specifically designed to help women navigate the challenges of corporate leadership. At her retirement party, she hugged me and whispered, "You've exceeded every expectation I ever had for you." The inheritance has become a force for positive change in ways Grandma Eleanor might never have imagined. We've established a foundation that supports women entrepreneurs, providing seed funding and mentorship to help them start their own businesses. Every time I review applications for funding, I think about Grandma trying to get that first loan from the bank. My personal life has flourished alongside the professional. The confidence and clarity I gained through standing up for myself has spilled over into every aspect of my life. I've learned to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, and to never apologize for taking up space in rooms where I belong. Marie, the coffee shop owner from Bar Harbor who helped me find my strength during those crucial weeks of reflection, still sends me care packages of blueberry muffins. Her daughter has since taken over the business, expanding it into a successful chain across Maine. "You inspired us," she wrote in her last note. Sometimes all it takes is seeing someone else stand up to make you realize you can stand too. The old family cottage in Maine has become a retreat center where we host workshops for women in business. Standing on that same deck where I once questioned everything, I now watch others find their own moments of clarity and purpose. The ocean is still there, constant and changing, just like the journey we're all on. Thomas and I have started writing a book together about our experience, tentatively titled Breaking the Pattern, A Family's Journey from Prejudice to Progress. It's been therapeutic, examining our story from both sides, understanding how deeply ingrained beliefs can be transformed through love and determination. Recently, while cleaning out some old files, I found the crumpled paper Thomas had waved at me during that infamous dinner, his evidence of my supposed betrayal. Looking at it now, I can smile at how far we've come. The modernization plans he once feared have made our company stronger, more competitive, and more humane. The $1 million inheritance turned out to be worth far more than its monetary value. It became the catalyst for a transformation that touched hundreds of lives, changed countless minds, and helped build a future where the next generation of women won't have to fight the same battles. It's a future Grandma Eleanor would have been proud to see. Last week, I spoke at Harvard Business School, standing before a lecture hall filled with young faces eager to make their mark on the world. Looking out at them, men and women from all backgrounds, each with their own dreams and determination, I felt a profound sense of hope. Success isn't just about breaking barriers, I told them, echoing Grandma's words from her diary. It's about building bridges in their place. It's about creating a world where the next generation won't have to fight so hard for their place at the table. As I drive home each evening, watching the sun set over the Boston skyline, I think about legacy. Not just the financial inheritance that started this journey, but the true legacy we're creating, one of equality, respect, and unlimited possibility. The chains of misogyny that once seemed unbreakable have become the building blocks of something better. In the end, liberation isn't just about breaking free from what holds us back. It's about creating something new in its place, something that lifts everyone up. And that, perhaps, is the greatest inheritance of all.